We're good to go. So as the people log in, just by way of introduction, my name is Chad Renando, and I, along with Di Somerville, Andrew Athwaite, and a few others, set up this approach for the Australian innovation community. My personal role is I'm the director for a company called Startup Status, and also the acting director for the Global Entrepreneurship Network in Australia. But really, just along with Di and a few others, have a passion for supporting those who support others, the ecosystem builders, the leaders, the innovation hub managers, the co-working space community managers, the government programs that support people starting new businesses, local government, state government, federal government, investment groups, local angel investors, VCs, anyone helping people build, grow, and scale a business in Australia. And so we set up a weekly series of seminars around that. And one of those is focusing a bit on how are we supporting people through programs. And so we've got a fantastic panel here today, really diverse. We have Melissa who will share a little bit more about the federal government, the entrepreneur support program that's happening across Australia at the moment. We've got Isabel from Western Australia and Space Cubed. Adam from down in Tasmania is doing some exceptional work down there, which we'll share. And I'm really excited to have Helen on board, who's been doing some really incredible work helping entrepreneurs who either are in prison or have just come out of prison, and how they then have entrepreneurship as a potential option for working within society and using their skills. So really excited to have us on board. And I'm also joined by my co-host, Di, who, Di, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more as far as the incredible work you've done both in regional Australia as well, specifically with agriculture and going over to Israel. Di, obviously you and I have spoken about this stuff for quite a while. We were having a bit of a chat before this started. What's your take on programs across Australia and what they're going to be experiencing, especially during the transition with COVID-19? Cool, and I think Di's just going to hop back on. I didn't know if she was staring intently at my question or if her video froze. And I think it was the latter. So Di's going to come on board here shortly. And just by way of a bit of a housekeeping, for those attendees who are coming on board, thank you very much. And if you have questions, we do have the Q&A turned on. So feel free to pop up the Q&A and ask questions as we go. And anybody else can upvote and downvote that as well. Feel free to have a bit of a yarn in the chat. Talk amongst yourselves. It's a little bit different from a physical environment where you can talk amongst yourselves. Just do it in chat. But if you have a question, we may miss it through the chat, so throw that in the Q&A. And Di, before you hopped off and hopped back on, and you were just staring intently there for a moment before it froze. It's all good. Programs across Australia, from what you've seen, what do you think they're experiencing as we go through this transition and the recovery?
Well, I think there's a really intent and purposeful look at ensuring these programs maintain the great work that's been done over the last decade. So there's been a lot of work, a lot of investment, a lot of great programs put together. And I think what a lot of these programs are now looking at is how do we ensure that we don't lose a lot of that work that we've done in the past as we move forward. So, you know, like it's great to see that people are getting together and sort of lobbying in a way to say, look, our program's still really important. It's probably more important now than it ever has been. So yeah, really getting behind some of these programs and understanding, okay, how does this change their work and what does that mean for all of us in the ecosystem going forward? So yeah, I think you know, there's great opportunity to strengthen these programs and to gain a lot of support externally to the normal people that we're speaking with. And we were chatting just about that before we all came online, that this has definitely opened the doors for more involvement. So look forward to the discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Di. And you raise an interesting point. I wouldn't mind just maybe leading on that one as we touch base around the room. Two questions I'd like to start off with, in addition to who you are and what you do. What I'd love to hear is, in addition to what your program is and how it's focusing, how do you think COVID-19 and the impacts from that have changed things from entrepreneurs? What are you hearing as far as just on the ground? And the second one is, how is it changing your program? Because among the attendees who are starting to hop on board, they're running a lot of programs as well, and they're supporting entrepreneurs. What can they learn from you as far as what you're seeing as far as how it's adapting? So how is it changing for your entrepreneurs? And how are you having to adapt your program accordingly? So I might just start over in Western Australia with Isabel. So maybe tell us a bit about yourself, your program, and what are you seeing as far as some of the impacts?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Lovely to meet you all. I'm from Space Cubed, and we run 3 key programs. One that is called Plus 8, which is a pathway for entrepreneurship. So we have from 1-day startup boot camps to a full-time, like 6 months seed-funded accelerator program. We have another program that is called She Codes, where we support women getting into tech. And we have another one that's called Mesh Points, which is all about regional innovation and supporting the regional ecosystems. So in terms of how we have been dealing with COVID-19, we have launched this big umbrella that we call Adapt, Don't Stop as a big campaign. And this is what we have been doing in our programs, and we are trying to support entrepreneurs to do in their own business. So the idea to really adapt to what are the new needs and understand what are the new opportunities. So yeah, obviously, number one, we are shifting everything online. And I guess the big one for us is to really make sure that we have a good balance between what is the online self-paced content. That is, I think the first thing that we have, the first offer that you have when you go online. The second one is really the facilitated sessions, how we have right now, the interaction with the facilitator and the mentor, which is something that you get a lot from when you have an in-person event. And the third one is really the networking. So one of the big and key things for Space Cubed is community. So we need to make sure that people, when they go to an event, you don't attend the event just because you want to hear what the speaker has to say, but you attend the event because you want to be with the community and you want to build your networks there. So within all our programs, we're really trying to focus on establishing this connection between the participants, the cohorts, and making sure that we're implementing this in a sustainable way, where when you get out of the program, you not only have the content, but you have, the community and the network that you're seeking.
And how are you finding the participants are engaging during this time? Like obviously it's a change for you, but it's also a change for them. Plus they have a whole bunch of new needs on their entire businesses being disrupted. They need it now more than ever. Are you seeing a difference in how they're engaging and their engagement levels?
I think we actually had an increase in engagement, probably because, because we offer a lot of mentorship and really try to have this one-on-one connection. Having people who have been through crisis and people who have done it before is what we try to offer. So we're actually seeing an uptake in people trying to be more connected, to ask for more advice. If you're at home and you're feeling by yourself, sharing your struggles and trying to get a little bit of mentoring on that has been, we've seen an uptake. I think the cohorts also, they have been quite close. We were a little bit scared, we just started our 6 months accelerator program. And we were like, oh my God, are they going to connect with themselves? What's going to happen? And we've actually seen them engaging a lot throughout all the channels, the Slack channels. Just as an example, today they have scheduled an extra session to pitch for each other and work on their pitches. And we are not involved. That's a purely peer-to-peer event that they have organized. So for us, it's quite amazing to see how they are willing and really keen to get more involved and get more feedback from the program, but also from their peers.
Thanks, Isabel. That's an interesting point as far as people wanting to hear from others that have been through these kind of crises. Obviously, this is new for all of us. It's new for us who deliver programs. It's new for the entrepreneurs. So it's hard to say, hey, can I hear from somebody who's been through a global pandemic before? Because that's like before the internet. But Adam, I want to maybe hop over to you down in Tasmania as far as what you're hearing, and maybe just pick up on some of Isabel's comments around, what kind of new different types of speakers do we need, and what kind of content? It's not just the same old business model canvas anymore of yesteryear. Like, what are you experiencing down in Tasmania? And maybe a bit more about what your program is down there.
Yeah, so my name's Adam Ostogel from the Van Diemen Project in Launceston in Tassie. We offer a range of business support services, from delivering the Entrepreneurship Facilitators program to younger people, in our regions, 18 to 24, but we engage with pretty much anybody in Launceston, the northeast region, and out to Flinders Island, down to St Helens, out to Deloraine, and all that sort of stuff in delivering that. We also deliver the ASBAS Digital Solutions program, which is obviously getting a lot more interest than it ever has before, as more businesses are thinking about adapting digitally. But we also, we have a business hub, we have a physical space, so we run a co-working space, but it's more built around that community and that collective support that we can create in that. And then I guess outside of that, I also deliver entrepreneurship education programs in schools through a separate entity as well. So I sort of live and breathe this stuff and spend a lot of time in communities traveling around, and that's from what we do at the Van Diemen Project has definitely influenced that. I think your comment before though, Chad, about not seeing it before, I'm also a global shaper and set up the Global Shapers Hub here in Launceston, and actually was on a call last week with the curator in Samoa where they had a measles epidemic in December, and they had to go through similar things. And it was really interesting checking in with them about, one, how they went through it, and also how they recovered, because there are these sort of, more isolated, geographically isolated situations that we can learn from around the world. And I think even conversations like this, sharing across Australia, is really beneficial, but also learning from around the world is really, really powerful. I think in terms of the questions around the type of people that are coming through, obviously our program's aimed more at younger people. So we're looking at those people who were casuals, who were in hospitality and retail, and they're the ones that are sort of out of work at the moment because their businesses aren't able to open, or there's limited hours or limited, I guess, people taking up their services. And so we're seeing people who are going, I don't want to go back. I want to do something more. I want to go and create something. All right, I've learned some things. I've learned some stuff about myself. I kind of get a sense of business, but I want to do something else, and I don't know what that is. With dreaming and then designing and thinking, and they're asking for that help, and they've got the time to put into it. So we're actually finding that the group is probably a little bit more idealistic. They're dreaming, they're thinking, but they're trying to work out where to turn to. And then in the delivery that we've been doing, we're finding that's probably where it is. We're seeing lots of people that are going, they're not sure, they're uncertain, they're not sure what's actually happening around them, and they need people they trust. And so they are coming back to ask for help, probably in ways they haven't before, sending an email, sending messages through chat boards, whatever it happens to be, and just really asking for that help and that trust, and that just, is it like, am I going to be okay type thing? And how can I get some help and some support in terms of what we've been actually helping people with? Like, we've really focused on how we can help people with that transition. So we've actually got like a 20-minute session on like how to meet with people remotely if you've never done it before, like the headphones and don't have microphones on your shirt and all those things that we've all dealt with that get really annoying. But we're finding that's the content that some people don't have access to. And then we've also been really wrestling internally, how do we help people who don't have digital technology like we all do? Like, we can all jump on a computer and have a web call. This is great. But we've sort of been really wrestling with how do we support people that technology is not natural for them and they're being forced to do it, and really looking at how do we still provide the resources and computers and obviously cleaning them down and everything else. We're discussing how we can do that so that those who need to work digitally and don't have the devices can still do that in these times, because it's more important than ever, and they may not have the money to be able to put into that just at this moment.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adam. There's 2 points I want to pick up on that are really interesting. One of them is the role of the hub in being a bit of this boundary spanner. You know, the fact that you go out globally and talk to somebody who actually has been through some form of pandemic, then to bring that back to not just your entrepreneurs, but to your region as a bit of a thought leadership in, you know, Launceston or Tassie overall. And the same thing I'd imagine over in WA and Perth, and then through the networks at Meshpoint. And the other one, which I am hearing from a few different people, particularly in regional areas, is how this is actually opening up the market. Maybe people who had been running the cafe or had been comfortable in a certain job, all of a sudden everything's disrupted. And so then we're moving over into, well, maybe I could be an entrepreneur, and having that conversation. But also sometimes they're the people that may not have thought about it before. And so there is, as you're saying, maybe a bit more education. I want to maybe, Helen, touch base with you on people who maybe need a whole suite of skills. And I really want to kind of understand, because you and I have had conversations over the years, as far as access to this quote unquote innovation ecosystem by people coming out of you know, the prisons to say, how do we re-engage? And now what's it like for them now with COVID-19? So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your program and what your thoughts are.
Lovely, thanks, Chad. I'm actually here with two hats on today, which is pretty fantastic. So one of them is actually being supported by an ecosystem, which is the SheEO network, which is fantastic. We were voted as one of the enterprises to support this year. And the second one is the work that we do with our entrepreneurial program. So our entrepreneurial program is run out of a prison in Brisbane, where we actually work with people who have the ability and the skills to be able to look at how they can be more community positive with their lives once they get out, and develop that hope and sense of future and for them is absolutely critical. What we found is a lot of people who get out of prison, when we try to introduce them to their local ecosystem, they feel completely out of water. They feel that they aren't really understood. We've actually had one ecosystem that said, no, we don't want anybody who's been in prison in our ecosystem at all, which is really disappointing from the perspective of these people have paid their debt to society and are really trying to move forward with their life. And the fact too that we don't have a physical space, because we have people from far north in Cairns down to northern New South Wales, way out west. So we're not even within a geographical area that we can help sort of set up an existing place. So most of the work that we've been doing has been inside, and this year was about really reinforcing the outside. We have some wonderful business ideas with some of the people, and actually just getting that support is really hard. And that's where I think some of the models that the SheEO network have put in place are fantastic, because that is, we're completely unfunded, we're completely voluntary. We have a network of business mentors who come in and actually help us mentor some of the prisoners. And the SheEO network is all about this radical generosity, which is, I think, is something that we can impart with some of the stuff that we're doing as well. So what I've noticed with them each week is that they're getting their community together and they're saying, let's do a give ask. And they're getting people online in groups and they're saying, what is it that you might need at this point in time? And is there somebody in our network that can help you with that? And that radical generosity has been amazing to sort of see that in action. This is a very difficult time, and probably one of the biggest issues for our guys is actually their mental health. And the reason why is, if they've come out and they've been on this road to this path of doing something differently, all of a sudden they've got these roadblocks there, and all of that sense of hope and sense of, can I step, you know, beyond the line, beyond my life, in the direction that I really want to take it, is hard for them to implement. And all the research says that if that first couple of months is not something that is new, then they're likely to reoffend again. So this is really hard for us at this point in time.
It's interesting hearing your perspective, Helen, in regards to both participating in a really giving, open platform like SheEO, and then almost wanting that similar kind of culture and support and ethos for the entrepreneurs that you support. What do you think is needed? You mentioned the role of mentors and facilitators and leaders. Where's the gap? Like especially now with so much pressure from COVID, what would need to happen?
What's really interesting is, I think that mentoring is critical at this point in time. What I've really enjoyed about this, if you look at all of those silver linings that can come out of this, is the chance just to step back. We're not allowed in prisons at the moment because obviously they'd be a little bit like cruise ships. They want to keep as many people out of them as possible. So it actually gives us the chance to self-reflect and look at our strategies and look at where we're going. And again, the difficulty we have with our cohort is that they've been doing all of that for the last 6 months, and now is the doing time, and the doing time isn't there anymore. So I think having that mentorship around them and being able to put, we keep on talking about, it's, you know, keep moving forward with your plans and your dreams, even though you can't actually enact them at this point in time. And I think having that bank of people around them that can just keep them encouraged and keep them moving forward is really critical, not to lose momentum. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Helen. And obviously the role of mentors and facilitators, everybody on this panel, quite a few of the people that are watching now, and they'll be watching on YouTube later. fill those roles. And now is the more important time than ever during the crisis or during the COVID-19 impacts. And even as Carrie Anderson, who's one of the thought leaders on regional innovation, said in the chat, adversity is a great breeding ground for entrepreneurs, exciting time for ecosystem builders, huge potential. Melissa, I want to hop over to you because probably as you anticipated the segue as we talk about facilitators and mentorship and leadership across Australia. And I seem to recall the number of like 140 facilitators across Australia, experts to be able to support within the program. Maybe a little bit about your program and what you're seeing from a national perspective as far as what's needed.
Sure. The Entrepreneurs Program is national. It's a $500 million program, and its core value proposition really centres around the people that are engaged in the program to work with the broader entrepreneurial community and their backgrounds and skill sets. So we've got about 140 advisors and facilitators around the country that work one-on-one with businesses. We have one-to-many models as well, but the core value for our programs in the one-to-one model. And those advisors and facilitators focus around innovation, commercialisation and growth, and each have their areas of expertise. The program is still ongoing and we still have, surprisingly, I think, quite a significant cohort of businesses that are continuing to move forward and continuing to do what they're doing. It's really pleasing. But we've also pivoted the program. So I'm leading the national, we're calling it Rapid Response initiative. And that really frees us up to be far more creative and flexible in the way that we work with our clients. You know, with all government programs, there's fairly strong guidelines and rules and procedures. So we've been able to start loosening our administration. We've started to think differently around how we administer grants, think match funding versus not match funding, given cash flow and capital constraints. We're also looking at timing as well, so allowing our clients to pause projects or allow them to pause payment if they're owing money on projects, or indeed to bring forward cash flow for them wherever we can. So we're doing that as part of the response, but more broadly in the rapid response area, we've been contacting all of our clients and our previous client cohort, alumni. So in the last 4 weeks, we've reached out and worked one-on-one with 1,800 businesses, just over 1,800 businesses around Australia. And it's telling us some really interesting things. So we're gathering that data and looking at that data for insights as to what next, what's needed, and we're tailoring our services literally by the hour to satisfy those needs as they arise. And what we're seeing is quite fascinating. So I guess if you looked at the type of clients that we work with, about a quarter would be startups type clients and about 3/4 would be more mature businesses. So 3 years of trading at least under their belt and a minimum turnover or earn or burn of 1.5 million up to about 100 million. And we're also restricted, I guess, in terms of the sectors that we work with in some parts of our program. So the data is a little bit skewed, but really pleasingly, the clients that we have that are working on innovation projects, you know, 67% of those businesses have told us that they want to keep going on those innovation projects. So that's keep investing, keep paying for, keeping the resources going and dedicated on those projects. And when we step back and look at the data, those businesses that are continuing with their innovation or involved or engaged in innovation have much lower risk profiles in this environment. And they are telling us that they are feeling really good. So the sentiment analysis that we've been doing is much better for those businesses that have already been engaged in research projects. So that's really pleasing to see, and it's interesting but perhaps intuitive at a time like this, that companies that have an innovation mindset are probably better placed to respond well and to feel more confident about their responses too. Some of the top of mind issues that our businesses are talking to us about, unsurprisingly, are supply, demand, cash, and also finance. And their number one priorities moving forward initially was around cash flow forecasting and financing, and now we're starting to see strategy re-emerging as top line. So I think the initial shock has washed through. People have done their busy work, trying to get their businesses into a survival posture, and now they're looking to thrive. They're saying, well, okay, we can hold the ship together. Now what might we do over the next period of time to position our businesses as best as we possibly can? And in response to that, and interesting, you spoke about the business model canvas earlier, we have teams of customer-led designers, we have digital specialists and technology specialists, and in the suite of services they normally deliver, we're customising those, and we've trimmed them down and made them far more agile and to the point. And so a lot of our businesses have been getting these business model canvas sessions on steroids. For example, food manufacturers who were exposed to the food service industry now find themselves without customers and with bills not being paid, and have decided that they would like to move to a B2C model rather than a B2B. Theoretically, that seems like a great move, but from a business model perspective, it's quite significant. And so we're able to really rapidly test within a couple of hours with these clients whether or not that is something that they should try and pursue. And if they pursue it, should it be a skunk works or should it be something more significant? So there's plenty of scope for us to continue to respond in the way that we deliver those one-on-one services to businesses. And the engagements that we're having range from a sounding board, a shoulder to cry on, providing connection to grants and other areas of assistance. But the biggest emerging area that we've changed our program to be able to meet is the connectivity between the businesses in our portfolio. So we have around 4,000 businesses that have been our customers, and we know them well and intimately because of the business model that we have. And so, for instance, in our commercialising area in the program, we know that one of the major areas of concern at the moment, the second biggest area of concern, is having a proof client or a test client to be able to go to market. And some of those prior arrangements have now dried up as enterprises are busy doing other things. And so we're able to look into the deeper parts of our portfolio and alumni clients and look for logical connections and introductions to try and replace those lost links or to accelerate some of those projects where we can. So for us, the biggest, this notion of adversity striking entrepreneurialism also happens within government programs. So some of the perceived shackles, if you like, that we have through tight government guidelines and public accountability have been loosened, and we've been able to start doing some of the things that we've long aspired to do. And it's really refreshing, I guess, the lesson for us as well, for all of our field force, as well as our team members within government, to be able to engage in that innovation and responsive process as well is actually energising. It's fun, and we're feeling really quite purposeful in what we're doing. So I guess in our efforts to be as responsive as we can to our clients, we're also really improving the mindsets of the people who are working within the program as well. It's a really nice side effect to what's happening. So yeah, we've got quite a bit of data that we're pulling together and presenting it back into government, and we'll hopefully clear it next week. And it'd be great to be able to make that data more widely available to the ecosystem to start seeing which pockets of the economy are doing well, which ones are unaffected. So for instance, our mining, engineering, technology businesses are storming ahead. And sentiment there is very positive. We've got other areas like our food manufacturers who are a two-horse race, but it would be great to be able to share that data more broadly, help people with future planning and areas of opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for that, Melissa. And there's just so much gold in what you just said there. There's so many things. Like for, some of the things I took away, between your 140 facilitators and 4,000 alumni, you're like a super hub as far as the connections to the networks that you have access to now. The deep insights that you can get from all of those connections and engagements. I picked up on the the diversity that a lot of people on the panel, and I'm sure a lot of the people, the attendees list will have as far as what the skill sets are of a mentor and a facilitator, from a counselor to a business expert and a business coach and all these other hats they have to wear, especially during these times. And the other one that really struck me, and just picking up on something that Adam said as well, is where you said you got maybe 25% are just your typical startups, but it's the other ones who maybe going for 2 or 3 years, they know how to, what I offhand say, how to adult in the business world, and now they want to do something new. And especially now with the business model disruption. I think you and I have had a bit of comments, especially in regional areas. You know, they don't have the cliche of the startup quite often. It's the, you know, it's the on farm, or it's the actual hands-on that you and I have seen out there, which is where a lot of the gold comes. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And like also, Melissa, another point you brought up around that commercialization space, and, you know, some of the work I do in the ag and food tech space works around test bedding, and how do we actually test proof of concept in the modern world, in the COVID world, and what does that model look like going forward? You know, I think that really raises, I know it's something I've been wrestling with as well, is how do we test and trial products in a market that's so restricted in the way it is, to ensure that there's things going on. And I think one of the things you did mention around, you know, the removal of the shackles, you said, and that sort of opening up and allowing you to do some stuff that you hadn't done before. I think what will be really interesting is, what does that mean going forward post this? You know, are they going to be things that are kept? Are we going to see a relaxation of red tape? I think will be super interesting to see where that lands.
Look, I think, Di, I think the answer is positive in that respect. I've seen enormous amounts of bravery in a public service setting. You know, it's challenging to take risks and to say yes based on trust. And to operate outside of guidelines. And I've seen that demonstrated significantly. And I would like to think, hopefully, that willingness to engage with risk, just like the market does, persists. And I know certainly in terms of flexibility around timing, projects and funding, I know that's coming. It takes a little bit longer than some of our other services, but it's coming, and I think it's a really positive change for government, and it's a great rapid testing ground, if you like, for these services, and to be able to prove that it's okay to be able to flex things when you need to flex them. Yeah, no, I'm very optimistic about what this means going forward.
Absolutely. And we do have some questions coming in, and one of them specifically, Melissa, around some of the program, which we'll get to here in a minute. I just want to encourage the people who are in the attendees list, if you do have a question, throw it into the Q&A, and feel free to up vote and down vote and engage that way, as well as keep chatting around the chat. And Richard, totally agree. Richard Christensen, who comments for Melissa, saying, thanks for sharing the great insights. Very encouraging to hear the strategy is re-emerging as top line of activity. So absolutely. We might start getting into some of the questions, which then may lead to others where some of the other panelists may want to have a bit of a yarn about a few things. Beyond this initial crisis, Jack asks, as a response to COVID-19, in other words, wide-ranging financial lifelines, where should state governments be focusing their efforts to support innovation ecosystems to avoid long-term damage and to capitalize on opportunities presented by this crisis? And Jack, if I may, I might be so bold as to extend that also to local governments as well. You know, because local and state governments for the regions which they're responsible for are saying, how do we support? We're going to be spending money. How do we actually maybe not just recover, but build some resilience into this as well? Across the panel, what do you guys think as far as what you're seeing in your relationships with your local and state governments?
Happy to kick it off. So I think probably from our perspective, what we're seeing is we're looking at how do we become more resilient in our own local economy. And I think that's part of it, because supply chains are changed, freight logistics is changing rapidly throughout this time. So we're starting to think, how do we reshift and refocus that? So from a Tasmanian perspective, we've started to think like, we're an island that imports apples, even though we're known for being the apple isle. So how do we start changing that? And how do we start thinking about that? And and how do we sort of foster stronger local connections within economies, and how do we start to strengthen that? Because the problem that we do have, and we've had quite a few conversations which we've called Stronger Together. We've brought key stakeholders from different industry sectors and people from the community just to collaborate and just share what they're doing so that we can all collectively learn. And I heard a great story in one of those, that a business supply chain to China had been shut down, and they started fishing around to find who could else replace that. They ended up running into the person in the corridor of the building they work in that they didn't even know was there, because they just thought they could only get it from somewhere else. So I feel like, how do we actually help unlock the skills, the knowledge, the capacity that are in our local communities to actually then support each other? Because then businesses working together, collaborating, then we can start to see where the gaps are and support innovation more in those spaces, strategically and targeted, but also start to take into account what we already have, rather than potentially trying to build a whole new sector, a whole new space into our economy. Start leveraging from the strengths that we already have in place, because we do have them in our regions. And probably some of those regional communities might not be putting their hand up as much, but once you start to get in and you start to meet people and you build those networks, you start to find where those places are and who those people are that are moving and shaking things, and then how do we support them, and how do we connect up those opportunities to help our local communities become a little bit more economically resilient, but then also those gaps are really easy to spot and support through that. So that's just one perspective.
Yeah, no, it's good, Adam. And it's the how that I'm curious about, because Di, even in our last conversation, we talked about in this digital world, kind of replacing that serendipitous collision that you get in a metro area. How do we get that same serendipitous collisions and the bumping into, across Australia, while we have this shift towards localism, the shift towards building resilience in our local economies? From WA and even Helen, how does your entrepreneurs that you work with be a part of this? As you see all this stuff happening around, and I could just imagine somebody coming out, watching all these things happening, saying, how do I actually inject myself in to be part of that resilience building? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that collaborative effort is really important. I think that's not just with the businesses that we're working with. There has to be, for instance, one of the businesses that I was looking at was wanting to repurpose, as part of the circular economy, items within the Queensland area. And I'd sort of asked, is there a big database somewhere that we have, a list of all of the output goods for the things in this area? And I was talking to the chief entrepreneur, and they're going, no, we don't. It's like, so it's actually looking at how do we have single sources of information that people can actually connect with, that can help them, rather than it being a bit more ad hoc, which at the moment those collaborative partnerships are. As Adam was saying, somebody ran into somebody else. We've got to be able to facilitate a way to make that easier for these collaborative, innovative ideas to actually match up with each other. With our guys, it's exactly the same. They feel more hesitant to approach people. They feel like they haven't earned their stripes yet to be able to do that. So it is quite difficult, and that's where I think collaboration amongst incubators is important. We've all got limited funds. Let's look at how we work together to be able to leverage resources, especially for rural, remote, and other people who, even in key cities, capital cities, feel remote, to be able to do that.
Yeah, thanks, Helen. And just before we hop over to Western Australia, I might just do a bit of a tricky one and plug the Slack channel that we've created since all this started beginning, where we have about 680 leaders in the innovation ecosystem at the moment. It is us, it's people who actually support other entrepreneurs. And I'll be emailing out, we can always put it in the chat channel as well. If anybody on the webinar, as well as the panel, wants to be a part of that, this is where some of that connectivity can happen. It is a bit of a proof of concept to give it a shot, but absolutely, how do we work together then? So when Helen says, hey, look, we need a hand, how do we support that? Isabel, over in Western Australia, what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I guess I would build on top of this whole idea of understanding what does being local and how do you create your local talent means. But I guess you guys already talked a lot about that. So maybe I'll bring the perspective of how do you actually take advantage from the fact that being online and using technology can actually be quite democratic in terms of if you're in the regions or if you're here in Western Australia, you know, we're still, you know, the regional coast. How can we take advantage of that to maybe access a more global perspective? You know, how can we now build this local but also like global and bigger community? The fact that we are having this discussion now that might not be happening if COVID-19 wasn't happening. You know, how do you get access? How do you make entrepreneurs? And this is something that we have as a challenge in Perth. You know, if we think of our market, our local startups, just as Perth, it's too small. You know, if you think of just Western Australia, it's too small. So how can we actually think globally? We have already been talking a lot with how do we connect to Southeast Asia. You know, +8 is because of our time zone. We are connected to 24% of the world population just within 2 hours of our time zone. So now that we have to, how do we think globally? You know, how do we not see ourselves as the small ones, but how do we engage in this broader community, which is a massive, massive opportunity for all of us? How do we increase this exchange?
Yeah, really interesting kind of dynamic here where we do want localism. We do want to, there is a shift towards focusing at the same time as we have global opportunities now because everything's digital. Melissa, from a national perspective, and also acknowledging, there's one thing that Carrie Anderson just pointed out as far as localized online platforms that connect businesses and services, LGAs being taken up. There are a few online platforms where you can use that. But Melissa, from a national perspective, are you seeing this bit of focus for localized approach to be able to build resilience in the regions as compared to then accessing global markets?
Yes, the answer is yes. So particularly in our rapid response at the moment, one-to-many and one-to-few response is very much regionally based. We've launched it today, and we're seeking to use collaborative networks in small group meetings over periods of time to come together to problem solve, look at opportunities for group innovation and the sharing of resources where possible. So it is happening certainly within the Entrepreneurs Program, but more broadly as well. And I guess anecdotally, and I'm biased because I grew up in a region, but anecdotally as well from the clients that we work with around the country, when we do try to, we try collaborative initiatives, they are most successful in the regions because they have an imperative that I guess our clients in major centres don't have around innovation. Usually distance is a factor and access to specialist services. So they have an imperative to do it, and we find it's fertile ground when we try and do these things. Our clients in metro centres tend to be spoilt for choice, if you like, and super distracted. So reaching out and collaborating isn't necessarily as easy as it is for businesses in the regions who are more used to having to rely on each other. The central challenge for everyone in this around, you know, it's not a new idea for us, this idea of how do we build a platform to connect people and keep it live and relevant and maintain it. And I guess the central challenge is around that maintenance, keeping it live and keeping it relevant. And surrounding it with relevant activity to keep it feeding itself and making it move forward. We are, as I mentioned, using this connection service now in our rapid response. And it's not just in terms of connecting our commercialisation clients to potential test beds, but also in terms of supplies. So many of our manufacturers have had supply issues. And we're matching them with other businesses who may be able to innovate with them around that supply challenge. And where possible, we're shooting for businesses that are close together geographically, because our international boundaries are one issue, but right now we've also got state boundaries. And depending on how this plays out over the next while, we will continue to see geographic lockdowns when there are spikes around the place. So being able to co-locate with other innovation partners and collaboration partners is going to be critical.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That connection, kind of the social connectivity along with the digital and the physical. I want to ask just a couple of admin questions, most that have come through specific to the program. One of them is to be eligible, you have to have $1 million turnover. That's just something from Claire, where she says, this seems to knock out a lot of startups. Is there a different program you're talking about? Is there a limit on who can participate in this program?
So the Entrepreneurs Program's got many parts to it. And I do encourage you to go onto the link, which is in the chat feed, to have a read through, because there's a lot of detail. Essentially, there's a couple of component parts to the program. So the growth component part is focused on businesses with a minimum turnover of 1.5, so either earning or burning 1.5 per annum. The accelerating commercialisation component is open, and it's only got an upper limit of up to $20 million in turnover. And that's available for startups to access if they fit the eligibility criteria. And then, of course, we've got our incubator support program, which feeds into the startup ecosystem as well. And that's predominantly 2 services, an expert and residence grant, and then also a broader grant around projects to help incubators perform duties or service the communities that they're in.
As you were talking, I saw a lot of the other panel members kind of nodding an appreciation of the facilitator network you have. Obviously, you know, like Helen was describing, having her own cohort of mentors as well. If people want to connect with your facilitators, not just as maybe an entrepreneur connecting, but as us, as other leaders, wanting to connect with your facilitators to maybe do some co-facilitation or shared mentoring of people in the similar regions, how would that work?
We welcome that. So a big part of our roles is to connect businesses into their local ecosystems and areas of support and opportunity. So we'd welcome that contact. If on our business.gov.au website, under Entrepreneurs Program, there's a list of advisors and facilitators by geography and region and their contact details. And you can reach out to your local advisor or facilitator and open up discussions. The grants that are administered in the program are predominantly, outside of the innovation space, are predominantly targeted at encouraging our clients to use the services available in the business community. So our action planning with our clients ends up in our clients reaching out to the innovation community and using fee for services in the innovation community. And I think that's one of the best parts of this program, is it encourages businesses that may not have free cash flow or indeed haven't yet reached into the ecosystem themselves, have had their heads down inside their own businesses. It encourages them to reach out and find others and to be able to pay for services that they otherwise may not have been able to pay for.
Thank you for that. So we've got about 5 minutes left, and I'm going to just kind of borrow on a question that Claire's asking, but also kind of tied into something that Di and I have been having a chat about. And very selfishly, I have a question for you guys. As we're building, and a lot of our passion initiative is building almost a cohort of ecosystem leaders. And it ties into something that Claire was asking as far as these knowledge brokers or these natural connectors. How do we tie us together? So as ecosystem leaders, as people who run programs, run hubs, run government entities that then interact with this thing we call an ecosystem, what would be your big ask? What if in 12 months' time, in maybe a minute or less, as we go around just quickly around the room to wrap up, what would be the best thing that we could do through this experience to then support the ecosystem, the builders, the growers, the people that are on this panel and on the channel? What's the best that can happen? What would the future look like to bring this together for Australia and support the builders? So I've asked the question 3 or 4 times to give the first person up time to think. And so I might go with Adam, who's to my right first. Adam, what do you reckon?
Yeah, thanks for that. No, I think probably the biggest thing is actually like these opportunities for us to chat and get to know each other and to get a sense of who's out there, because I feel like if we look at like contact lists on a website's nice, but we've got to get to know what their drivers are and what their passions are and potentially what they bring that's not in their professional experience, but it might be their personal passions and everything else. We've actually got to be able to connect across different spaces and things like that. And then also, how do we then be really open and share the connections that we're building? So I build 10 connections, my business partner builds 10 connections. That means we have a greater mix, and then we can start sharing and collaborating back and forth. Obviously, the Slack channels are a great way to do that. But then it's also just how do we keep touching base and just going, hey, what are the things you're seeing? What are the things we're seeing? Because I'm sure that even through this conversation, there are things that are coming up that might not have been on radars, but they should be, because we're all in different spaces, focused on different things. I work with students and trying to get 8-year-olds how to start thinking about how to start a business. So I'm thinking about how does the language work, and how does the excitement values work, and how do we build core skills rather than just financial modeling and things like that, because we know those things will come later. So again, it's those sorts of things that I think just are really beneficial, that we can be sort of open, share, and connect beyond being ecosystem leaders, but actually going like, let's just be people who just want to help. That's what we're all here for. That's why we do what we do, because we actually care about this stuff and we really want to be there to support.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. Isabel?
Man, you put me in a hard position. It's hard to say something after he said everything, you know, just be open, share, and connect. I think that's it. Like what we're doing right now, it's what we have to keep doing. And I think it was good that we touched base, like Melissa talked a lot about the one-on-ones. And it's interesting because when you talk about big communities and numbers, in the end, I actually find that it's a lot about the one-on-one. It's really, you know, when you know the person's name, when you have, you know, the freedom to get the phone and say, hey, Chad, I need some help, or what do you think about that? Can you give me this opinion? Like the one-on-one is what makes the massive difference. So I guess for us, just feeling comfortable reaching out and really knowing who is who and who is doing what, I think that's just the best opportunity that we have.
Excellent. Thank you. Helen, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's all about collaboration. Like Adam, you were saying you're working with younger teenagers. Some of the people I work with have been on the street since they were 12, you know, through to university qualified people. So that being able to understand what things have already worked rather than reinventing the wheel, collaboration, you know, combining funds to be able to achieve a greater good. To me, I think those are really important as an ecosystem. And often when there's limited capital around, there's always this sort of a little bit of competition to sort of put your hand up and say, well, I need it. But, you know, what can we do together? To me, that's critical to be able to really leverage all of these ecosystem builders' capabilities and skills.
Excellent. Thank you. Melissa?
I think everyone said it all. I guess I want to add that I personally been very busy in a rapid response, quickly get things out, meet immediate needs, posture. And this week I flagged that I would be offline for 2 days to consume as much knowledge as I could and talk to as many diverse people as I could about what's next. You know, we've had our immediate response. So what's next for our businesses and what should we be doing? And the enormous value that I've got from being able to reach out to a really diverse set of people in a network and say, give me your angle, give me your perspective. What's your hypotheses? What should we be doing? Including our customers as well. So I think that really underlines for me that it's collaboration, but it's also that exposure to diversity and diverse ways of thinking and pulling the threads together and finding nuggets of gold. And Helen, I have to say, you know, in some of the comments that you've made, you know, the area that you work in is not the area that I work in per se. And there were nuggets of gold in there for me that I took notes on and will feed into, I guess, my forward planning and thinking. Can I take an opportunity to just plug? Norm's put a comment on the side in the chat. The Entrepreneurs Program is going through a reset, and as at June 30, we will have new delivery partners and a new footprint of advisors and facilitators around the country. Accelerating commercialisation is one of the key pillars in our program, which deals with our commercialisation outcome. And Norm and his crew are looking to recruit accelerating commercialisation advisors currently. There's a link in there. If you're interested, I strongly encourage you to reach out and have a look at the roles. And it's an exciting time, and that will reset the program's footprint and its people for the next 3 years at a minimum. These opportunities don't come around very often, so lean in and engage if you can. Sorry, Chad, for stealing your time.
No, I had a good chat with Norm. He's a great guy. Looks like a fantastic program. We'll send that link out in the email follow-up as well as put it on the social when we do the follow-up post on this. That's excellent. Di, we're right just a little bit past the top of the hour. I might just hand over to you for any final comments and thoughts before we do the final round.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, everyone. I think it's been a really engaging conversation, and thanks for your input into what the future of us all looks like. And to Claire's point, yeah, for Chad and I, we don't get paid much to do what we're doing, and that's part of working this out, as to ensuring whatever we provide next has value. So everyone else has volunteered their time, so really appreciative of that. Just my few key takeaways. I think the localized circular economies discussion was really interesting, and the understanding of capacity in each area, which I've found even in my own region, people aren't aware of what the capacity actually is and what is actually there. So I think there's a body of work that local councils or hub leaders can work on there. My big concern there is basically the market reaction to this. So, yep, let's all do local, but guess what? Local costs a little bit more. And is the market going to be in a position to pay for that? So I think that'll remain to be tested. And I hope that, you know, buying Australian or buying local and the premium on that is worthwhile. The democratization through technology is incredible. And, you know, we've talked about regional to metro, but then also Australia globally. And that is such a critical point, that now is the time to really act and not just talk about Team Australia and hunting as a pack and brand Australia. This is the time to come together, but in a really practical way, about how we talk outwardly to the rest of the community and what Australia has to offer, and what Australia as a whole, our unique value proposition is. So that was some of the key takeaways for me. Thank you so much. I think the underlying momentum here is all about thriving and not just surviving, which is an old term that in my post-military days was drummed into us. So thanks, Chad.
Awesome. Thanks, Di. And thanks to the panel. We are going to, on the one hand, wrap this up, and we are going to stick around for another 10 minutes or so and have a bit of the chat after the chat. We're kind of let our hair down a little bit, and which my hair is getting longer and longer, so I can actually let it down now because it's definitely a COVID cut. And but we will be having a bit of a chat after. So if you want to stick around, you can watch that. Otherwise, thank you very much, everybody who's been asking the questions. Hopefully we got to most of those. We might get a few more after the words, but thank you very much, and have a good day.